adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features in D&D 5e to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we're going to be going over the new feats that were introduced in Unearthed Arcana this month. For a little bit of background, in case anyone is unaware, Unearthed Arcana is a monthly articles series put out by Wizards of the Coast to show off some of the stuff that they're playtesting and designing to let other people playtest it. The way it generally works is they will release some playtest material. People will play it, and then next month, when they release new playtest material, they'll have a survey you can take about the previous month's playtest material, so they can get feedback on it and start making adjustments and the things like that. So, Unearthed Arcana is not official D&D stuff, but a lot of DMs, myself included, do take inspiration from Unearthed Arcana and do allow some Unearthed Arcana stuff to be used in their games. I've covered Unearthed Arcana stuff before. I've done some subclasses in that. This time I'm doing the new feats because we just recently did feats on D&D Deep Dive a little while ago. And I'm actually a big fan of feats. I really enjoy them in their 5th edition version. And they've had kind of a weird upbringing as they've gone through the various editions. They first appeared in the 3rd edition, and there were hundreds of them. You got into a new feat every other level. Fighters got extra feats, and it was this kind of piecemeal way to build your character. But they were such incremental improvements to the character that they really felt kind of bland. But because a lot of times, like my favorite example to use is fighting with two weapons in the 3rd edition. Generally required you to have a dex score of at least 15. Because that was what was required to take the 3 feats you really needed to actually have positive modifiers when you made your attack rolls. Because normally, if you were wielding two weapons, you had a -2 penalty to your main hand and a -6 penalty to your offhand, which meant at low levels, you just were negative. It didn't matter what other bonuses you had, you were just going to be negative. So you generally had to take 2-weapon fighting was the first feat you would take, which would reduce the offhand penalty by 2, I think. Then you needed an improved 2-weapon fighting, which reduced, I think, by another 2, and then you took ambidexterity, which removed the offhand penalty completely because you no longer had an offhand. And then you could actually do some 2-weapon fighting. But there really wasn't a build for 2-weapon strength fighting, because you had to have a dex of 15 in order to be able to do dual wield. And having both strength and dex at really high scores generally didn't happen often. You might have a fighter that did it, but that was about it, because fighters only really needed their strength or dexterity score. So anyway, that was the 3rd edition. For 4th edition was kind of the same, but a little bit more specialized. They had class-specific feats and race-specific feats and all these other things that you still got them every other level, but they felt a little bit more powerful because the feats you would get would be specifically tailored to your class or your racial abilities. That meant instead of just a few hundred feats, you were starting to get into 400, 500, 600 feats once you got to the end, because every class had their own set of feats, and every epic destiny and everything else. There were just so many feats. 5th edition, the feat list significantly smaller, and each feat is designed to drastically to change how you play the character. You only can get a feat once, basically every 4 levels. Whenever you get an ability score improvement, you can trade the improvement for a feat. So they should be a little bit more powerful. You get a lot less of them, and you have to make a sacrifice as you don't get to improve your ability scores. So the reason I'm telling you this is that's kind of how I'm going to measure the feats in here as to whether I think they're decent feats or they just need to be reworked or just scrapped all together. Are they do they change how you play the character? They shouldn't be little piecemeal things like they were in the 3rd and 4th edition. They should drastically alter how you play the character, give you new choices as far as how you can use your character. And are they worth giving up an ability score improvement? Going up to the next kind of the threshold for your ability score is a big deal. Depending on what you're improving, it can give you more hit points if your constitution goes up. And it's not just one hit point. If your constitution goes up, you get 1 extra hit point for every level you've gained. So that's a big deal. If you're level to 12 and you go up, that's an extra to 12 hit points. Your attack rolls can increase. Your spell save DCs can increase. Your armor class can increase. Like, all of these things are really, really useful. Not to mention all this skills that won't be improved. So to give that up for a feat, you really need a justification for it. There has to be a tangible benefit. So with that being said, let's dive into the new feats. We're going to start with Artificer Initiate. The basics of this feat are you get to learn 1 cantrip of your choice from the Artificer spell list, and 1 first level spell of your choice from that list. Intelligence is your spellcasting ability for the spells, and the unique thing about this is whenever you gain a level, you can replace either the cantrip or the first level with another spell of that level. So you can replace a cantrip with another cantrip, or you can replace the first level with another first level, which is cool. The first level spell you learn, you can cast it once without using a spell slot. And to cast again, you need to take a long rest. And you gain proficiency in 1 type of artisan's tools, and you can use those tools as a spellcasting focus for any spell you could cast that uses intelligence as a spellcasting ability. So, breaking this down and comparing it to what already exists, there's a feat that I went over in my feat video called Magic Initiate. It's one of my favorite feats because it's a super quick and easy way to dip your toe into some magic to give you some abilities you normally wouldn't have in your class without having to sacrifice a level of your primary class. And it can be really, really useful. I've seen spellcasters dip into another spellcasters pool. Like sorcerers might take Magic Initiate to get a warlock spell, or if a vice versa, a warlock might take a sorcerer spell, or maybe a bard spell. Because they all use charisma for their spell casting. A druid might take a cleric spell, or a cleric might take a druid spell. These are all the things I've seen, and it's really, really nice for non-spellcasters to get a little bit of magic. When you can prepare it to Artificer Initiate, with Magic Initiate, you get 2 cantrips instead of 1, and you get a first level spell. Everything else about how the spells work is the same. You get to cast the first level spell once without using a spell slot. You need a long rest to reset it. The big difference being Artificer and an Initiate lets you change every time you level either the cantrip or first level. But that's about it. And you get the artisan tools and can use them as a spellcasting focus. For me, for first things first, the Artificer's spell list isn't great. Artificer is a half caster, so they generally have a more limited spell list anyway, because they're not casting spells as often. Generally, that doesn't really matter when you're just dealing with their first level spells. But even their first level spells, there's not a lot there that's really that impressive. There really isn't any combat spells in their first level spell list, other than catapult, which is basically you take an object and then shoot it at someone. So you can like pick up a rock and then fling it at someone. With a lot of speed, and it's decent. The creature makes a dex save on a failed save. They take the 3d8 bludgeoning damage, and if you cast it at higher levels, it does another d8 for each level above 1. So that's the only really attack spell that they have, which is kind of the more common thing to see with things like Magic Initiate. Everything else is, things like Cure Wounds is kind of useful, just based on the idea that Cure Wounds in general is going to be either cast, if it's cast by a bard, they use Charisma. If it's cast by a cleric or druid, they use Wisdom for it. So this would be a cool way to get an intelligence version of Cure Wounds. But it really doesn't change much. I mean, the spell itself isn't really incredibly affected by your ability modifier. It just adds a few more hit points. But you don't have like attack rolls or just saving throws built into it that can really be hurt if you're using the wrong ability score. So yeah, this seems really, really underpowered. I like the idea that, it kind of fits with the Artificer having the ability to kind of craft and create magic as they go, because it allows you to replace the spells. But you can only replace the spells on a level up. So that's not that useful. And to be blunt, if you want to use artisan tools as a spellcasting focus, you can flavor text it. Like, I know that's one of the things for artificers as far as the rules are concerned. But if you really, really want to be a wizard that's actually someone that goes around with all these gadgets on him, you can just flavor text all of it. Like, it doesn't affect the game at all if instead of saying you point your wand and cast magic missiles, you instead say, I pull out this contraption, squeeze the trigger, and out pops these bullets of force. it's just flavor text. It doesn't really change anything. So as far as Artificer and Initiate, I think this one, bare minimum, needs to go back to the drawing board. I don't really see a huge benefit to dipping into the Artificer as a Feats instead of just letting them dip in by, multi-classing into it. So this one, I would say Artificer and an Initiate, just scrap it. I don't think it's a great feat. Next feat is Chef. First thing, you can increase your Constitution or Wisdom score by 1 to a maximum of 20. You get proficiency with cook's utensils if you don't already have it. And you get 2 other really cool things. As part of a short rest, you can cook special food, provided you have ingredients and cook's utensils on hand. You can prepare enough of this food for a number of creatures equal to 4 plus your proficiency bonus. And at the end of the short rest, any creature who eats the food and spends 1 or more hit dice to regain hit points regains an extra 1 d8 hit points. This is effectively another version of Song of Rest, which is a bard ability, and it's a really useful ability. So I like that. The other thing you get, with 1 hour of work, or when you finish a long rest, you can cook a number of treats equal to your proficiency bonus. These special treats last 8 hours after being made. A creature can use a bonus action to eat one of those treats to gain temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. So, interesting the things about this. The stuff you can do with it is based on your proficiency bonus as opposed to an ability score, which I actually like, because this means generally with like healing in that, it's going to be tied to one of your mental ability scores, charisma, wisdom, and intelligence. So characters that don't specialize in that tend to get diminished returns on any feats or abilities that need those. With this, though, it's based on your proficiency bonus, so literally any class can take it. And all of these things are really useful. People being able to use a bonus action, which I've talked about before, action economy, having your uses for your bonus action are really important, because it's another thing you can do every turn. And whichever side in combat has more actions has the advantage in that combat. So giving them a way to give themselves, temporary hit points is great. It's a buffer against damage, and it's a really nice way where in combat, if you have a class that doesn't really have a bonus action they're using, they can still have something to do. And there's nothing that says one character can't have all the treats. So if you have a meat shield, like a fighter that you're just a standard sword and board fighter, they can have all the treats on them, and they can just pop a treat in as their bonus action, since they're not using it. Being your standard fighter, they just attack and then get ready to get hit, and every turn they get that little buffer of temp hit points, which add up over combat. If your proficiency bonus is only 4, 4 to temp hit points doesn't seem like that much, but in 4 rounds of combat, if they eat them and you use them because they're getting attacked every round, that's 16 hit points that they've just saved, without really affecting anything, because they're just using the bonus action for it. So cook, really like. I don't see anything really wrong with it. This would be one I'd say print it. It's good. Crusher. This is one of the 3 damage type feats they put in. I love all of them, but let's dive in this one specifically. First things first, increases strength or dex by 1. This will be common with all of them. Second, Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, you can move it 5 feet to an unoccupied space, provided the target is no more than one size larger than you. And the third thing, when you score a critical hit that deals bludgeoning damage to a creature, attack rolls against that creature are made with advantage until the end of your turn. I've mentioned this before. I'm a huge fan of what I call the controller type character. It was a class type thing in 4th edition. And you see it in video games and stuff like that as well, where the whole point of the character is not so much to be a super heavy damage dealer or to be able to keep the party alive or to take a hit. It's designed to control the battlefield, whether that's taking people out of combat for a little bit or moving people around. It's just always useful. And this turns your basic attacks into a controlling ability. Every time you hit with bludgeoning damage, which can be anything from a hammer or a mace or maul, all the way to unarmed strikes from people like monks. Anyone that does bludgeoning damage, which I think every class has proficiency with at least one blunt damage weapon. You can use that to move people around. Now, you can only do it once per turn, so it's not like monks could move someone to 20 feet. But added up over the turns, it's really useful. And then anytime you crit, everybody gets advantage on the attack rolls against that person is super useful, especially if you're playing a class that gets a lot of attacks, like monk or berserker, barbarian, or fighters in general. If you're doing blunt damage, it's useful. One thing that was brought up to me that I didn't think about talking about another one is all it says is when you hit a creature with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, not a weapon attack. So this is an ability that spellcasters can use as well, as long as there's an attack roll involved, because that's generally how they define attack. Is you have to make an attack roll. You can move people, and then any crits you make, which require an attack roll, you can get advantage on. So yeah, lots of really cool, interesting ways to do that. Then the next one up is Eldritch Adept, and this is where I start getting a little bit wary. Because I've talked before about in 5th edition, the things that define the class should show up within the first or second level, and they should make the class feel special. I'm not a huge fan of feats giving other classes access to those special aspects of the class. Just because, again, it dilutes how special you feel when you're playing that specific class. And it really kind of defeats the purpose of choosing the class if you can just get some of the really beneficial abilities just out of nowhere. And that's where Eldritch Adept kind of comes in. The basics of it is you learn one Eldritch Invocation of your choice from the Warlock class. Now, it does mention if the invocation has a prerequisite at all, you can choose that invocation only if you're a Warlock and only if you meet the prereqs. And then whenever you gain a level, you can place the invocation with another one from the Warlock class. So Eldritch invocations are a defining feature of the Warlock class. They permanently modify spells, and a lot of them will give you access to like first level spells and that you can now use, but basically as cantrips. You can use them at will. There's other really useful ones, like the one that used to be abused a lot by monks, shadow monks, was Devil's Sight, which basically lets you see in magical darkness, so they could cast darkness using their key points on like a pebble or something, pick the pebble up, and they would have moving darkness that went everywhere with them. And they would basically have an advantage on all their attacks because none of their enemies could see them. The enemies didn't have a line of sight. If they did find a way to attack them, they had a disadvantage. It made for a very powerful character. But the kind of limiting factor is you had to take 2 levels of Warlock to get access to invocations. This just gives you access to invocations. Technically, at first level, if you're a human and you take the variant version where you get a feat at level 1, and I'm not a fan of that. I do like that anything with a prerequisite requires you to be a warlock, and I like the idea of a warlock being able to burn an ability score improvement to get an additional Eldritch invocation. Because again, that's a defining feature of the warlock class, and I think choice-wise, choosing between taking a different feat or improving your ability scores, I think that's an interesting choice. But giving it to just about anyone, I'm just not a fan of taking away what makes a warlock special, especially since it's a second level of ability. So normally to get that, you'd have to burn 2 levels. And this, you just get a feat. So that one I would probably say I'd be more interested if they started making class-specific feats. I'd be more interested in seeing that modified a little bit to make it a little bit more difficult to get, but as a class-specific feat if they ever did do that. Fey Touched. This one is actually paired with another one called, I think, Shadow Touched or something. But it's basically designed to kind of give you kind of a little touch of the Feywild. The basics of it are increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1, like a lot of other ones. And then you learn the Misty Step spell, which Misty Step is a 2nd level spell, so you couldn't use Metamagic Initiate to learn it. So this would be the only way for someone that the Misty Step spell is not in their spell list to actually learn it. So you learn the Misty Step spell and one other first level spell of your choice. The first level spell must be Divination or Enchantment. You can cast each one of those spells once without using a spell slot. And then you need to finish a long rest. And the spellcasting ability is the ability increased by this feat. So if you choose to increase your intelligence, their intelligence based spells, blah, 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 blah. I'm a little bit torn on this. I love Misty Step and teleportation in general. I think it's a really, really useful spell that any class can benefit from. However, this just feels a little bit... I don't know. This is one I would want to see it actually used in a game. Like, this is one... It doesn't seem broken. Like, I don't see too many issues where min-maxers would you use this to get just really unfair benefits. But I also don't see... Like, to me, this feat is more of a role-playing feat, which is great. I'm a huge fan of role-playing, but feats generally don't. Feats are generally mechanical changes. There's not really a whole lot of reason to take a feat as a role playing, as a purely role playing thing. And as far as the mechanics of this, other than, again, I love Misty Step, and having two first level spells that you can just cast is really nice for casters and non-casters alike. But it is kind of a interesting one. I've mentioned before, if you ever had an odd number for an ability score, taking a feat that increases something by one is a nice way to get up to the next the threshold and then get some extra stuff for free. So I could see Fey Touched kind of being one of those the things. But beyond that, like I said, I'd want to see it played before I could pass judgment. But as of right now, it doesn't look bad. I'm not sold on it. It's not something I would probably use for any of my characters. Fighting Initiate is the next one. It does have a prereq. You have to have proficiency with a martial weapon. So there's actually a couple classes that don't get martial weapon proficiency. So that does limit it a little bit. But the basics of it is you get a fighting style from the fighter's fighting style list from first level. And that's it. It does mention whenever you gain a level, you can replace the fighting style with another one from the fighter class. So that, again, adds that little bit of customizability, but you don't get an ability to score improvement, and most classes that can benefit from a fighting style already get a fighting style. The one that pops to mind that I might want to think about this is Paladins don't get the dual wielder fighting style. And I have a Paladins of a Vengeance Paladin I created that dual wields a longsword, has the dual wielder for feat, or the two weapon for fighting style. I think that's what it's called. But he's got the dual wielder for feat, but he doesn't get to add his modifier to damage of his offhand attacks. So I could kind of see like a paladin using that, or maybe a rogue if they went to swashbuckler, to taking something like that, or maybe taking the duelist for fighting style. But without something other than, hey, you get a fighting style, it's really not all that useful. And again, there's a lot of other classes that already get a fighting style. And fighters get it on their first level, so you could literally just multi-class once into fighter and get this as the same benefit plus plus the other first level for fighter abilities and the fighter hit dice for that level. So, I think that one's underwhelming. I think it bare minimum it should also have an ability to score improvement like for the previous feat. And yes, I am drinking chocolate milk because I am a child mentally. Next up is Gunner. Gunner increases your dex score by 1. You gain proficiency with firearms. You ignore the loading property of firearms, and being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose the disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. This is literally the crossbow expertise, or crossbow expert feats for guns. I mean, that's really all it is. The big difference being crossbow expertise gives you a bonus attack, a bonus action attack with a hand crossbow, and Gunner doesn't. But it gives you the ability to wield firearms, which currently there are no classes that have a firearm proficiency. So if you are going to have firearms in your campaign, and you're not using like a homebrew class or subclass like Matt Mercer's Gunslinger archetype, or home ruling, homebrewing that artificers can use guns or something. This technically would be the only way to get proficiency in guns, and that being within 5 feet doesn't impose disadvantage on ranged attack rolls is super useful, not only for ranged characters but spellcasters. I know a lot of spellcasters that take crossbow expert simply because of that aspect, so they can basically point blank cast their spells with no issues. So yeah, with crossbow expert already giving you literally everything except the firearm proficiency, I would actually be more interested in just having crossbow. Like this basically is a reskin crossbow expert to give guns to your campaign. And I'm a bigger fan of having a class or subclass that specializes in guns than having any character be able to just learn how to use guns and fit it into their fighting style. Guns could create issues in games. They're really powerful, have insane ranges. And even Mercer's Gunslinger, they had to add extra things like misfire numbers and stuff to balance them against the other weapons in the game. So, going with just the Dungeon Master's Guide for firearms, I'd say I'm not a fan of this, and I just stick to crossbow expert and the Gunslinger archetype if you want guns in your game. And it makes the Gunslinger feel special. Or, homebrew in that artificers can use guns. Because I think that's part of some of the notes in the Artificer. So, let's go to the next one. This is another one that takes a unique ability of a class and gives it to anyone. Metamagic Adept. Metamagic is a sorcerer thing that you get. I believe this is second or the third level. I'm actually not 100% sure. I know you get sorcery points at the second level. You might get Metamagic at third because you get Metamagic after. Anyway, with this one, you learn to do 2 Metamagic options of your choice from the sorcerer class. And they work just like regular metamagic, and you gain to 2 sorcery points to spend on metamagic. And they can only be used for metamagic. So if you're a sorcerer, you to take this, you can't use those sorcery points to create new spell slots or anything like that. And you regain all spent sorcery points when you finish a long rest. So, again, sorcery points and metamagic are a defining aspect of this sorcerer class in 5th edition. I'm not a fan of giving it to other classes just because, again, it belittles the sorcerer and makes them that much less special. If anyone can use metamagic, even in the extremely limited use they should have here, it just doesn't feel as special. Now, I made mention before of one of my other favorite feats, which is Martial Adept, which gives you access to the Battle Master's maneuvers without being a Battle Master. And I guess for me, the difference between that is the Battle Master gets significantly more ability to use the maneuvers. Like if you have a Battle Master and then someone that took Martial Adept, both fighting and both decide to use a maneuver, the Battle Master is going to be able to do more maneuvers. They're going to be more effective, and he can use them more often. whereas the martial adept just gets a one and done thing. It's only a d6 they get to add to it. It's just nowhere near as useful. So that I'm kind of fine with because it adds that little flavor, but it doesn't take everything away from that. And it's only a subclass. It's not a defining feature of an entire class. This, again, other than they can use it a little bit less, it is the exact same as the sorcerer. And that's not something I'm a big fan of. In my book, I would prefer a character multi-class because that's a definite choice that you have to weigh the positives and then the negatives. This really isn't. Like, Metamagic is super useful, especially if you're doing something like Twin Spell or Quicken Spell are massively useful. They change the game to the point where there's certain aspects of the magic system in 5th edition that are written specifically so that sorcerers can't abuse those two metamagic options. So not a fan of that one. I think even for sorcerers, they get so many sorcery points over their career. I don't see this being a benefit to sorcerers. Giving them more sorcery points and another metamagic option. This one I think they should just toss. Excuse me. All right, Piercer. This is the second of the damage types ones, and again, I love all of these. Increase your strength of dex by 1. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals piercing damage against a creature, you can re-roll one of the attack's damage dice, and you must use the new roll. And then when you score a critical hit that deals piercing damage to a creature, you can roll one additional damage die when determining the extra piercing damage that the target takes. A lot of people kind of undervalue piercing weapons, mostly because they don't really use them. Rogues will use daggers, which is nice, but they only do a d4. Nobody uses spears, which sucks because spears are pretty cool. But nobody uses spears. And that's... Oh, and then rapiers, which again is mostly a rogue, or I've seen blade singers use it. But compared to slashing damage and bludgeoning damage, they're a lot more common for the melee classes. However, and this was brought up to me by one of my players, actually, since this isn't a melee attack, this means bows and crossbows can benefit from Piercer. And if you combine Piercer with Sharpshooter, you've got a lot of damage, especially when you crit. This lets you re-roll one of your damage dice once per turn, which is super useful. It'll just basically increase the average damage that you roll. And then you score crits, you get an additional damage die. If you're doing something like a rogue, I mean, they're already doubling a lot of dice, and then you just add another one on that. That's great. But when you add that with sharpshooters plus 10 to the damage shot, like, that's a really large amount of damage. And Piercer could become, if it gets published, Piercer could basically become the add-on to Sharpshooter that every ranger and every longbow user takes. Because I mentioned in my other video, everybody takes Sharpshooter. It's a super useful ability. I can't really knock them for a feat. I can't really knock them for it. This would be another thing that if you got your Sharpshooter, there's no reason to not get Piercer. And again, it changes how you play the character pretty significantly, to the point where I could even see fighters using lances for two-handed weapons, or rapiers and the things like that, instead of the long swords, simply because Piercer will give them more damage. So I like that. Poisoner is the next one. It gives you a lot of things. When you make a damage roll, you ignore resistance to poison damage. You can coat a weapon in poison as a bonus action instead of an action. Really, really useful. You gain proficiency with the Poisoner's Kit if you don't already have it. And with 1 hour of work, using a Poisoner's Kit and expending 50 gold worth of materials, you can create a number of doses of potent poison equal to your proficiency bonus. Once applied, the poison retains potency for a minute, or until you hit with the weapon. When a weapon coated in this poison deals damage to a creature, the creature must succeed on a DC 14 con save, or to take 2d8 damage and become poisoned until the end of your next turn. Poisons are vastly underutilized in 5th edition, mostly because to apply poison to a weapon, you have to burn your action to do it. Which sucks, and then it only lasts for a single. It only lasts until you hit with the weapon, so it's only good once, and it generally goes away after a minute. So it's not like you can poison your knife when you start out for the day, and then just get an extra little bit of damage on your for first combat. No, you really need to do it either just before combat starts, or in combat. With Poisoner, that thing where you can coat the weapon as a bonus action is big. Again, I will always say this: if you can find extra ways to use your bonus action, it is always beneficial. This adds extra damage. You get a built-in ability with the ability to create potent poison, to always have poison on you, and there are poisons listed in the player's handbook, and then the DMG vastly expanded it, that you can buy in cities in that to be able to use as well. A DC 14 con save is not really difficult to beat at high levels. However, there are more powerful poisons as you get to higher levels. They're more expensive, and con saves are not something a lot of monsters have proficiency in, so even at high levels, there's a chance that you're still going to be getting something out of it. And the fact that they become poisoned until the end of your next turn is another big thing, because the poison condition gives them disadvantage on everything. So it can be highly effective, not only for you to do extra damage, but to help you the rest of your team do extra damage through spells, through other things that require saving throws, stuff like that. So I love Poisoner. It does give you a lot as far as like the features. So that would be the only thing is possibly removing the annoying resistance to poison damage. But even that, it just makes it so you can actually use the poison a lot. So, yeah, I really love that one. But Practiced Expert. This is another one that kind of gives you an ability from a class. You gain one ability score of your choice. Increase one ability score of your choice by 1. You gain proficiency with one skill or tool of your choice, and choose one skill or tool proficiency. Your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make using that chosen proficiency. This one basically gives you a lesser version of expertise that rogues and bards get. And I actually like how they do this, because unlike rogues or bards, where they get 3 or 4 different expertise. This only gives you one. You have to burn a feat in order to get it. And it gives you an extra proficiency in general. I like this. If you want to build a character that's not a rogue or bard, but is really good at one specific thing, this is the feat that would let you do that. And it doesn't really to take away from what makes rogues and one of the things that makes rogues and bards so special, which is their super high skill checks on certain things. So I like it. I think it's good. Shadow Touched. This is the other one, like Fey Touched, except it's the darkness. Just like the other one, increase in intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1. You learn the darkness as a spell, and one first level spell of your choice. First level spell must be from illusion or necromancy, and it works as the exact same way as Fey Touched. You can catch each spell once. The spellcasting ability is the one that you increased with the Feats. I think Misty Step is significantly more useful than Darkness. But this one gives you access to necromancy spells, which are powerful. If you watch my wizard class where we go through over the necromancer, the part 2, necromancy spells do damage. They're super useful even for first level. Like I said, I don't see anything super nice about it. I don't see anything that's really turns me off to it. It's just one of those. I can't see a class build in my head where I would go, no, I did definitely need Shadow Touched to make this build work. And the same thing's true about Fey Touched. I really like Misty Step, but I can't come up with a class build where I'd absolutely need Fey Touch. So we'll see. Again, if it actually gets play tested and I see it in action, it may change my opinion on it. Next one up is shield training. Increase your strength, dex, or con by 1. You gain proficiency in shields. In combat, you can don or doff a shield as the free object interaction on your turn. And if you have this as a spellcasting or pack magic feature, you can use a shield as a spellcasting focus. This is another one where I'm like, I mean, shields are useful, and if you wanted to build like a wizard that is kind of like a battle mage, where they, use a sword and shield and go into combat. Shield training could be useful for that, because having the shield as your spellcasting focus means you don't need a free hand to interact with your components or anything. And this says for your somatic components, you can use this as same hand that's holding your spellcasting focus. So that theoretically, if you wanted to do like a war magic wizard, you could do shield training and then a weapon proficiency to give them proficiency in something other than a dagger to fight with. And you could create kind of a cool war wizard out of that. Beyond that, most other spellcasting classes that would benefit from a shield already have ways to use that shield as a spellcasting focus. Paladins and clerics can have an emblem on their shield they can use, which effectively makes their shield the spellcasting focus. So, I don't think it's broken. I think the few instances where I could see this being useful are really limited. Like, you would need to build a very specific character for this to be useful, and because of that, I just don't see the benefit of adding such a specialized feat without it being like a class specific feat, which don't exist in 5th edition as of right now. Only the 3 left. I know it's getting up pretty long, but I didn't feel like this is splitting this into 2. So Forgive me. Slasher, the last damage feat, or damage type feat. Increase your strength of dex by 1. Same thing as always. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals slashing damage, you can reduce the speed of the target by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. And when you score a critical hit that deals slashing damage to a creature, you grievously wound it. Until the start of your next turn, the target has disadvantage on all attack rolls. Again, this to me is a super controller style feat. Because you can reduce speed, which again can be super useful. If you have a big melee kind of guy that's going to try and go after your clerics, you can't heal, or your sorcerer, so they can't cast tons of spells. Making it so they can't get to them is really useful. If you combine reduce speed with things like being knocked prone, it becomes even more useful. Because you can knock somebody prone with maybe a shield master bop. Knock him prone, hit him with anything that does slashing damage. And that means for a normal a creature that is at the 30 feet movement speed, the slash kicks him down to 20 feet. Knocking him prone makes them waste to 10 feet. They only have to 10 feet of movement left. So if you've effectively ditched 2/3 of their movement for it to turn, and there's no limit to it. You can do it once per turn, every turn, anytime you hit them with slashing damage. And then the critical effect, disadvantage and advantage, is the defining feature of 5th edition. So the ability to impose disadvantage on all attack rolls is a big deal. Do that to a dragon, where they get 3 really rough attacks every turn, and watch the battle switch. Especially useful if you are playing like a fighter, where they get a lot of attacks. Like I said, I love all the 3 of the damage type of feats. I think they really change how you play the character, and they open up a lot of doors for just building really fun, unique characters. So love that. Next one is Tandem Tactician, which lets you use the help action as a bonus action. And when you use the help action to aid an ally in attacking a creature, increase the range of the help action by 10 feet. Additionally, you can help to 2 allies targeting the same creature within range when you use the help action this way. So the way the help action works is you normally have to be within 5 feet, so basically standing next to him. And you have to choose an ally that you're aiding. So you go, hey, I'm going to help my rogue, and it takes your action to do that. What it does, it gives that character advantage on their next attack roll against it. It's actually really useful, but the fact that you have to burn your action to do it kind of relegates it mostly to like Beastmaster Rangers. I see a lot of pets, our animal companions doing that. I've seen a few familiars doing the same thing. So that's really the only place I see it. With this feat, you turn it into a bonus action. Again, using bonus actions is always useful. And you increase the range by 10 feet, which effectively makes it 15 feet, because it was a 5-foot range before. So that is super useful, and now you can help two allies instead of one, basically to double team the bad guy. There really aren't any downsides to this. Again, if you're a bonus action heavy class like a rogue or a monk, where you're constantly using your bonus action for various things, or anyone that dual wields, you're probably not going to take this. But anyone that doesn't have a great use for the bonus action, this is a perfect feat to pick up. Yeah, I don't really see a downside to it. I think it's good as is, and I would totally let someone you use that mic campaign. Finally, we have Tracker. This is another one that gives a defining feature of a class to someone else. Start off, increase your wisdom score by 1, and you learn Hunter's Mark. You can cast it once for free, then you need to finish a long rest, and you have advantage on wisdom survival checks to track a creature. If you go back to my Ranger video, I to talk about how Hunter's Mark was designed to basically be a class feature for the Ranger, but because they didn't want to create an entirely new system to be able to use it, they just piggybacked it on the magic system and made sure that Rangers were the only classes that actually got that spell, other than Vengeance Paladins. So there's no other way to learn Hunter's Mark other than by being at least a second level Ranger or a third level Vengeance Paladin. And again, it was done that way because that's a defining feature of the Ranger. They're really good at doing extra damage to specific enemies. They are hunters. So this gives you an ability of a class that's already really underpowered. So I'm not a fan of this one. I like that Hunter's Mark is a Ranger's thing. If you really want a spell like it, take Metamagic Initiate and take Hex. It'll still give you the extra damage for min-maxing, but it doesn't give you all the additional stuff like being able to track them easier and stuff that's kind of built into the Ranger themselves. So yeah, that is all of the Unearthed Arcana feats. In the comments below, let me know what you thought. Was there a specific feat that you're like, oh my god, this fits with this character I play, or this character I've thought up perfectly? I need this feat. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything like that, or if you have ideas for new feats and stuff like that. Always thrilled to hear it. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. It feeds the fickle deity we call algorithm, and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this. I try to put out content at least a couple times a week, depending on my mental health. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But the vast majority of the stuff on here is D&D stuff. So if you like this, you're probably going to like everything else I do on here. Also, share the video with everyone to make me feel special. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.